What's good, everyone? How's everyone doing today? It is me, back from the proverbial dead, in order to train you guys 2 weeks after my last stream. So I'm super excited. I'm happy to hear that you guys like the new starting screen. I actually have many versions of this one, so it's going to be pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm happy about the hype train. I guess people really missed me, and I really missed you guys too. Trust me. How do I word this? How do I word this? How do I set this up? So, first things first, I do want to apologize for getting back too late. I did say I was going to start streaming weekly. I still plan on doing that. I didn't have the best mental health weeks for a while, so that kind of sucked. But more importantly, honestly, the reason why it took so long was because I really wanted to have like a script and something to talk about. The problem with teaching strategy is that I have so much that I want to talk about that I literally do not know where to start. So it took me until even last night during a voice chat that I had to be able to, like, it took me up to oh wow, we have one more. Can I get another sub? Can I get one more? I'm at 93%. How many subs do I need in order to beat my See, that's the thing. It's not even about the money at this point. It's just I need this. Like I'm fixated on it now. But speaking of subs, but yeah, we've been having VCs. It was a lot of fun last night. The time change is really bodying me. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. But yeah, so I believe now we're gonna do this one just because I like Goku. But yeah, it's been a crazy week. Before I begin, I would be remiss not to begin by talking about the immense loss that this community has had in the last week or so, where we have lost one of the most influential artists in modern history. And I don't say that lightly. We unfortunately did lose Akira Toriyama, who is, in my opinion, one of the most influential artists. I do want to kind of go out there and, oh wow, cool, we beat it. Thank you, Buttercream. That satisfies that itch in my brain. That satisfies the itch in my brain. But yeah, we did sadly lose Akira Toriyama, and the dude, one of the most influential artists in modern history. There's no denying that. Most people probably aren't even aware that he inspired the design for Mario with Arale. Dragon Ball has been a big part of our lives, so we will miss Toriyama. I'm probably going to do another stream this week where, if you guys want, I'm going to do another stream and I'm going to share it where we're all going to get together, and I would love to hang out with you guys on stream. I'm going to probably do a voice chat and we're all going to talk about our favorite Dragon Ball memories, how we got into the franchise, and just basically just honoring the man in his life. But I'm sorry to start the class on such a dour note, but I feel like I can't not do it at this point. I feel like I have to talk about Akira Toriyama before just basically starting the stream. But yeah, thank you for giving me Kefla. But yeah, also Rollback came out, and I wanted to try to do something with Rollback as well. I might incorporate it later down the line, but Rollback is just fundamentally broken at this point that I'm just in shock. So the game is kind of in a sorry state right now. I'm surprised any of you guys are still watching me talk about it, but I'm glad that you will, because today we're going to be talking about cultivating the proper mindset for strategy. So last week, for those of you about to beat your last record, keep up. Did I not beat the last record, bro? Yeah, Rollback needed to be rolled back. I agree 100%. So in discussing this, when it comes to strategy, last week we talked about a syllabus where I laid out more or less the guidelines of what I expect the stream to become. I basically laid out everything that we needed to go, or everything that we needed to do, and talked about some foundational concepts. Today I'm going to elaborate on those foundational concepts, but this time in a very practical way. This isn't just me greeting you guys. We're actually going to get some brand new juicy content that I am excited to talk about, and I'm very, 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 very excited about this particular class. Though I'm going to be completely honest, all I have is an outline. So I'm going to be freestyling it. I may repeat things a little bit. If I do, I'm super, super sorry. I'm working on getting, editors to be able to edit things down so that way the YouTube video is at least watchable. But I do think that we're going to basically discuss some very keynotes, because I do have everything that I want to talk about here. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me today, Saber. I'm super happy to see you guys here. But today we're going to be talking about the foundations of strategy as laid out, not necessarily by me. I want you guys to think of me as a translator, where I'm just bringing essentially martial arts treaties and a bunch of different strategic documents and stuff like that, and translating their principles into Dragon Ball. I'm just a translator, guys. But I'm going to be talking about some foundational principles and how I'm going to be able to translate it for you guys. So hopefully with this, we can truly begin practicing and we can truly begin studying together. First thing that we need to do, more than anything, is we need to cultivate the correct attitude for practice. What does that mean? The correct attitude for practice in this particular environment, in this particular situation, means that there are certain things that we need to be aware of before we even start. So that way we set ourselves up for success, and that way we don't get blindsided by unnecessary things, or we don't lose track of our journey. We can stay pretty deeply rooted in what we want to do, because one of the worst things that can happen is that maybe you're following strategy, but you're only half-hearting it, or maybe you're learning a couple of things, so you're putting a couple of things to practice here and there. But then what ends up happening is you effectively lose track, and then you become confused. You start in a situation where, wait, I thought this meant, this, and you start talking about a whole bunch of different concepts that have nothing to do with what you were actually supposed to learn. And then suddenly you realize maybe you didn't understand it as well as you think. And that just leads to a lot of issues. We want to prevent that. However, this is not necessarily going to be like me telling you what to do or what to think, but more of introducing the foundational principles for a logic that I want you to take into the game, and by and large, human conflict in general. Oh, cool. I received a level 1 hype train emote. Have fun with that, guys. Enjoy your emote. Enjoy your emote. So, before that, I want to start by correcting some very, very, very common things. I'm going to use terms that if you are old followers of me, you are probably familiar with, but they have different or reworked definitions. I'm going to start with corrections. The biggest one is rhythm. I'm going to retire the timing for rhythm, because in my opinion, rhythm doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. Instead, rhythm is going to get covered under the umbrella of timing, because really, timing implies that there is more deliberation in what you're trying to do when you're pressuring your opponent, that you're actually targeting something. I feel like rhythm inadvertently caused everyone to hyperfixate on things that did not actually matter from a strategic standpoint with pressure. So that term is going to go out the window when we begin discussing pressure again. The big correction, however, that I want to talk about is zones. So for those of you that don't know, a lot of our neutral classes in the past had they took a lot of influence from Doc, I don't remember the full name, but it's a old DBFZ neutral guide, where Doc laid down some very powerful and foundational concepts, and one of the biggest concepts that he laid out was the concept of zones, Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3. At the time that it came out, I want to be super, super clear. It was revolutionary. And there was nothing short of revolutionary at that point, because it was nothing short of revolutionary at that point because it helped us visualize the game. Most people don't realize that this screen is actually quite large. For a fighting game, especially. We like to talk about full screen normals and stuff like that, but like, even here that almost reached full screen, look how much space actually exists behind Cell. If Cell decided to move back, he has an entire screen's worth on the other side. So if I go here, and let me just take control of Cell for a second, I have an entire screen's worth over here as well. This screen is 3 times the size of what we see in any given moment. This screen is massive, guys. It is huge. And it has to be. So when you start thinking about like full screen normals and stuff like that, and like, you know, big normals that go through projectiles and stuff like that, a lot of what people colloquially nicknamed Mickey Mouse neutral or whatever, it's actually not that big in the grand scheme of things. Not if you're moving properly. Now, the zones help us categorize them because zones really are talking about the screen in any given moment whenever you guys are interacting. For example, this screen, obviously, I can't move back unless Cell moves forward. If Cell moves forward, I'm going to naturally move back. I have room to move back, but it's relative to Cell. I can't basically excise him from the frame, unfortunately. I feel like that's going to be clipped. That being said, however, it did help us understand how to move in relationship to one another. So, for example, this is zone 1. This is zone 2. My bad. This is zone 3. This is zone 2. This is zone 1. Pretty easy. Universal. But now the problem is that a lot of people are like, oh, I hang out a lot in zone, zone 3, and then I try to come in zone 2, but the buttons are so massive, it leads to this Mickey Mouse neutral, blah, 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 and all of these complaints. I no longer think that zones are an effective way of viewing the screen. And I think the biggest weakness of the zone system is that we can only envision the zones when our opponent is standing still. For example, if I do that, hang on. Recording settings. What recording am I on? Slot 1. Don't repeat randomly. There we go. What did I really accomplish? I didn't really move that much. You see what I mean? So like, okay, I'm in zone 3, right? If Cell moves back, if we move back together, sorry, hang on, let me see. We didn't really move all that much forward. There was not a lot of distance crossed. I moved forward literally not even a dash's worth to him. It's basically the equivalent of me literally just walking forward a little bit because he moves back. So technically, we're still more or less in the same zone. Not only that, but the zones really change depending on the character's normals. Like, yeah, we can be able to attack you from zone, 2 or zone 3, but like, this is a massive button. Like, this button is huge. And if we view it from the context of zones, he's hitting you from across the screen. This is not an effective way of viewing the screen, especially because it does not properly account for the relationship between our individual characters. I can keep you in zone 3 just by moving back as you try to move forward. Or I can end up in zone 1 if I just decide to decide to jump forward and then Cell decides to dash forward. Now he's in zone 1. This is not really effective because if he doesn't move forward, then technically, like, it's hard to describe, but like if Cell, for example, dashes, right? We're in zone 1 now. This is zone 1. But if he decides not to dash, I'm in zone 2, but he's still technically threatening me. It's not an effective way to view the screen because it doesn't give you enough useful information on how to properly deal with what's actually happening here. So, we will be retiring zones for the most part. I may refer to it every now and again, but I'm going to start dividing the screen up in different methods. And the first order of business for this particular evening is we are going to reestablish some old terms, and we're going to establish a couple of new terms. Is everyone following me so far? I know I seem kind of rambly just because I don't have a script, but am I making sense? I mean, I have an outline, but not a script. But I'm making sense. Can I get some ones in the chat so that way I have enough time to drink my water? Cool, 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 cool. Cool, cool. So, this is a new chapter. Establishing terms. This one is going to be pretty big. I'm going to start with the term that we started establishing towards the end of WTG. Now that we're back, I'm going to reassert it again. We're going to talk about Maai. Maai is spelled M-A-A-I. And it is a Japanese term that usually belongs to Japanese martial arts. I'm going to apply it here. Maai just basically means interval. Pretty simple. But what does that mean for us? Maai, we can think of it in practical terms as engagement distance. Now you might be wondering, why not just call it engagement distance then? Why are we calling it Maai? You don't even speak Japanese, bro. And that is true. But the reason why we're going to call Maai and we're going to use the term Maai is because when we refer to things with in English, the things that we understand with words that we translate from it. For example, if I use the term engagement distance, what are you guys going to think of? Like, for example, if I just say engagement distance, real quick chat, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I want you to go ahead and follow it along. Write your definition out on a piece of paper. You can, if you're on YouTube, you can go ahead and pause this and then come back and go ahead and continue listening to this when you have this definition out. But for chat, for those of you that are here, I have a question. What do you think of when you hear the term engagement distance? What do you think that means? Longest normal. Okay. God, Cell's so tall. With a perfect jawline. Get him an NBA dealership, bro. A distance where an interaction can occur. Okay. It almost makes you think of zones again. Kind of. The physical or digital space between the combatants. Okay. The specific distance I need to be to do this thing. Okay. That's pretty much what I was saying. And those are all, every definition that you guys mentioned, to some degree, is a part of Maai. Specifically, how far can you engage from? Okay. The distance at which you can begin an attack or attempt to win neutral within one beat. We're not going to talk about beats yet. You're ahead of the curve because you are cool and subscribe to WTG. The point being here is that, or the point that I'm trying to make is that if I say engagement distance, it does not encompass the totality of what Maai actually means. Maai, you can almost think of as an umbrella term. Hear that, kids? You could be cool too. Yes. Maai is an umbrella term. So one thing that nobody mentioned here, except Saber, which I'm proud of you. Yeah, you know what? I should do a cookie emote. I feel like I should make the Dragon Ball icon for subscriptions cookies, because I'm always telling people, give this person the cookie. Let me know what you guys think about that. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments down below on YouTube. I'm very curious. Do you guys want to, like, if you guys are going to join us in chat, do you want the Dragon Ball emote or do you guys want the cookie emote? I might make, let's see. I'll see what I can do. Because I do like the Dragon Ball emote, but the cookie is just becoming iconic. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that what nobody mentioned except Saber was timing. Maai encompasses, how about a star? Like when you're in preschool. That'd be funny. But anyway, so Maai does not cover timing. Another thing that it doesn't cover is directionality. For example, you guys are thinking about the longest grounded normal probably, but are you thinking about this or this or this? Probably not. You guys were most likely thinking about the 5H. And I'm not going to lie, I kind of threaded the needle a little bit by using 5H as an example when talking about zones. But Maai does not... Yeah, I'm sorry. Maai does not... yeah, you're correct. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Thank you, Fuzzy. What I meant to say was engagement distance does not cover timing. Maai encompasses a lot more than just simple physical or digital distance between your characters. It actually also incorporates the direction of the attack as well as the timing. These are incredibly important because the direction and timing of the attack could be the difference. Like if I'm in the corner against Cell, it could be the difference between a clean escape or getting perfect attacked with the same move. That is an element, that is a dimension of Maai that gets covered. So while Maai does mean engagement distance, Maai covers essentially 4 things that we need to think about. It's going to cover the actual physical distance where you are your safest, but still able to threaten the opponent. Engagement distance, if you will. Maai also covers the timing of your respective attacks. So for example, this hits 18 frames. This hits 21 frames. That 3 frames will make a difference. This is 16 frames. All of these things matter. The timing of your attacks matter because even if you have everything right, if your startup is too long or you select the wrong move, it doesn't necessarily matter how far your opponent is from you. They're probably going to be able to dodge it because they have enough time to see it coming. There's a lot more to it than that, but that is an example of how timing, or in this case, startup, can really, really affect the move that you decide to do, which is a part of Maai. The other element of Maai is the direction of the attack. So for example, yes, I can attack from here, but attacking from here is very different than this, because now I'm attacking from the other side. A cross-up does not have the same range considerations as an IED forward. An IED forward doesn't care, but a cross-up, if I'm too far away, I may not be able to cross up at all. For example, if I set him to crouch, right? Right, forgot Bluku's actually good. See? I will whiff. Even if he doesn't react. Even if I can hit him here, I'll even set the bot to not switch. Right? So, just so you can see this, I can hit him. If he doesn't react, I'm not oh, thank you so much for the raid, C4IQ. I was just thinking about you today. Actually, I was just thinking about you and Sir. I hope you're doing well, man. It's been a minute. Flashbacks to 4D vector math from theoretical mechanics. All right, bro, chill. All right, chill. Your button's going to whiff. Now, I can hit you from here, but the timing is fundamentally different from a cross-up. However, if I space it out, that's a nasty cross-up. Yeah, I can't remember the last time I saw you streaming. I retired for a little bit, but I'm back. I'm back. So, you can kind of... Let me see if I can get him to turn around. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. That timing is going to be fundamentally different as well. The directionality, the reach, timing, all of these things are quite important. And also, it covers moves like this. The Z... Oh, sorry. I'm not going to call it the Z-axis. Although I believe we should. But I got yelled at by somebody who studies physics. The fucking diagonal... Damn it, I'm already demonetized. The diagonal axis of a screen that I want to call the Z-axis so badly. Because... it covers that, okay? It covers the diagonal axis of the screen. Apparently, it's not the Z-axis. My bad, okay? But also, press 1 in the chat if you think it should be the Z-axis. In honor of Toriyama, it should be the Z-axis. That's my argument. That's still just the XY axis, bro. No, you shouldn't. I disagree. 1 in the chat. Ignore the scientists, okay? Ignore the scientists. You know what? I'm going to be polite. I'm going to snooze these ad breaks. Because you guys are cool. You did not. Everyone who says 1 is wrong, but also correct. I hate physics. I hate physics. Anyway. But this is why we're going to be using Maai. 2, because Fuzzy is cool, and I know it was them who yelled at you. Listen. Listen. But, yeah, being able to understand, for example, Maai is what allows us to be able to use characters like Beerus. Understanding, for example, the directionality and the spacing and how this hits is essentially what makes Beerus such a fierce character. And it's also one of the reasons why, or it's one of the foundational principles that goes behind his neutral. Being able to understand the angles of attack, being able to hit them, and basically use the angles to vary the timing. You're basically playing billiards with your opponent. And that's important. This is an example of how a character can use these principles in order to effectively bully an opponent. However, as you can see, it requires a great degree of accuracy. If you are not accurate, you're probably going to get hit. Oh, but sub Junie? Somebody give Junie a sub. I feel like I earned a sub after giving him a team today. If you know, you know. I feel like Junie probably left. I feel like Junie probably left. That's crazy. Anyway, so this is a pretty great example of how Maai is very, very, very important. Oh yeah, no, I just really. Basically, Maai and understanding Maai is what's going to allow us to choose which normals in certain situation or which specials basically to employ in our strategy. We're going to be focusing on that quite a bit. So Maai is a term that you're going to hear a lot going forward. There will be other terms and more terms beyond the few that I'm going to give you today, but I feel like these are the ones that we're going to start with that are the most important. Does anybody have any questions about Maai? Okay. When I say, does anybody have questions? My question is, are you okay being pop quizzed next time I see you? Trying to. Junie's seeing. It's never not going to be funny to me. I usually do well on those. Okay. So, if we're all good on Maai, we're going to start with a brand new term. This is going to be mainly a neutral term, but it's going to be a term that is also going to apply to defense. If you are already a fan of if you guys are already in my VCs and you guys are already a subscriber in the WTG server and you join those VCs, you're probably familiar with this term that I came up with, which is beats. What do I mean by beats? Beat is an interval, ironically, because Maai means interval. Beat, in this case, means an interval between actions and whether or not those actions are segmented. For example, when I attack with 2M here, this is one beat. It doesn't necessarily matter that this is 17 frames from that distance, and this is 10 frames from this distance. Both of these are one beat. The speed of the attack does not always matter unless it is very, very slow. I didn't pay $60 to block. Yeah, you did. So, I was mid-match playing the ugly team, but I'm listening. So, that is a beat. Now, I cannot effectively reach with my 2M from this distance. It is too short. I cannot attack with one beat. However, if I dash, that's 2 beats. So even though the startup was 16 frames, it's 2 beats because I had to do a completely separate action in order to be able to set up the 2M. If I do, that's 3 beats. You following me so far? 2 beats. Now, the reason why this is important to keep in mind is because I think that this is much, much more efficient than simply considering zones. Because if we consider zones, then it becomes increasingly easy to just... Oh, my bad. Let me do the other one. Let's do this. If we think about it in terms of beats, or in zones, it becomes incredibly easy to just maintain the distance. Like, yes, they can arrive a little bit closer, but at this point, it's not really going to matter. And the reason why they were able to go closer is because the back dash does not move as far as the forward dash, generally. So here, it's a pretty good example, where you can kind of get a really good visualization of the distance here, where we maintain our zones. Where I'm still technically in zone 2, but I have to get even closer in zone 2 to be able to attack them. You see how that starts to get confusing? However, this is where it gets very, very important. Beat is much easier to keep track of because now... Ooh, mistimed it, my bad. I can time it. Now, here's the thing. Notice how when I did it before, it was almost instantaneously after the dash. But here, I delayed the dash. I let the dash sit a little bit. That does not affect the actual beat itself. That's still 2 beats. Because it's the amount of actions that you can take. Now, there are some actions that are combined for 1 beat. For example, I would consider air dashing, 5M, 2 beats. That's 1 beat. I consider IAD, you can consider it 2 beats, but I like to think of IAD as separate from dashing and normal dashing. And, you know, it's called instant IAD for a reason. And it really just comes down to how quickly you can input it. So I like to think of this as attacking in 1 beat. Now, you can make it 2 beats, depending on how long you delay it here, unlike when they're on the ground. And the reason why is because you have many different avenues of attack available to you, depending on whether or not you delay. So, for example, I can do that. 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 IED is where it gets a little weird. But basically speaking, I like to think of IED as a single attack. But I like to think of this as a separate 2-beat attack. It's flexible. Now, I know where this is going to get... I still don't think it's very clear what a beat is. Is that true? Do you guys feel like you don't know what a beat is? I feel like a beat is a universal... It's like music, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 beats in a measure. That's 4/4 timing. And it's very, very similar. 1 beat. 2 beats. Does that make sense? Them, Fuzzy. Them, Toad. I'm getting not seeing how it's helpful. Okay. The reason why it's helpful is because if I am trying to attack an opponent, instead of standing in zone 2 or trying to stand in zone 3 to avoid them, I'm going to stand right here. This is the ideal place. If you're trying to manage Bluku 2M, this is the ideal place to stand as Cell. Around right here. A little bit further back. Because I forget, like, the backdash just does not move far back enough for me. So it's about right here. And the reason why is because if I want to hit him, I have to take the beat. So instead of trying to react to a 14-frame normal, I can react to the first beat. I can react to the dash and start jumping preemptively. That will get me clear of the normal. All because Cell is managing to keep me at 2 beat distance. If he's all the way over here, yes, it's true that I have to do this. But at that point, this is so obvious that this is not even really a threat anymore. However, right here, this is a threat. This is a threat to you. You guys are probably not even sure if my 2M will reach. Will my 2M reach? Yes. Will my 2M reach? No. Will it reach? Yes. Will it reach? Oh. Okay. See how shimming can kind of... No. Will it reach? Yes. Will it reach? No. Oh, yeah, actually, that's caught me off guard. There we go. You see why zones are not really useful? Because I'm technically staying in the same zone, but if I just micro walk forward, I'll hit you. If I micro walk back, I'll no longer hit you. Do you see how confusing this is? This is why beats is much better, because no matter what, whether I step forward or not, it doesn't matter because it's a beat. Now, if I dash forward, that's a beat. So I don't consider micro walking necessarily significant enough to constitute a beat, because I can still attack almost instantaneously, very similar to the IAD. I treat micro walking like this. I don't count it as a beat. But if you make sure that no matter where you are, even if I micro walk forward, I'm still gonna whiff. Doesn't matter. Because now, no matter what, I have to commit to the dash. You don't have to play a guessing game. You are now managing my toolkit. This is what I mean when I say you need to manage somebody's toolkit, or manage this person's normal, or manage this person's lariat. What that means is not avoid them by staying all the way on the other side of the screen. What that means is you need to stand at a distance and use your Maai to effectively make it so their normal has to take more time, or their move has to take more time to travel towards you. And ideally, if you are able to, at least if you're trying to defensively run away from somebody, you want to make sure there's an extra beat behind what they do. Because if there is no beat before it, this is now unpredictable. How many of you have dealt with jump scare normals? Because there's a character that is extremely effective at this. How many of you get jump scared by that? And it reaches fairly far as well. And that's just the medium version. The EX version, even faster. See the problem? Now, if I am here, if I see Kefla take that beat, I can avoid this. If you've ever played me or played somebody and then wondered, man, how did they avoid that? How did they ID back so perfectly? It's an unreactable low. And then you have people that are like, oh, we're doing the mathematics. They probably had time to react to the EX noise, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm probably listening to music and I'm playing the game on mute. Don't do that. That's very bad, but I do because I like my music. So no, I did not actually react to the sound. What I reacted to was the beat. Because if I know a Kefla's here and I'm trying to not mess with her, I'm trying to avoid her, I'm trying to lock her out, I do not want to deal with that. I do not want to deal with that. So I'm going to stay right here, and if I see a Kefla dash forward, I'm IDing back. Because remember the same principle before. Right? Maintaining the distance. She can hit me here, but it doesn't matter because now I want to maintain that distance. So I want to maintain that distance. She still can hit me here, but she may not risk it because I'm just backdashing. I could just IAD. If she IADs and I'm looking out for that dash, like that, she's most likely going to whiff. That's how I dealt with it. Now, here's where beats can become very useful. You can use this offensively as well. For example, if I have her go that, right? See? Oh, my bad. I mistimed it. That was not... I can attack in exchange for that beat. I can just... If you've ever wondered, why did my lariat lose to their lariat? That's probably why. Oop, hit the wrong thing. Not only that, but I, depending on what I choose to do, don't even have to... I don't even have to use a normal anymore. I don't have to dash. She gave the beat for me, and now I can attack her and threaten her on reaction. Even if she does nothing, and then walks away and causes me to whiff, I can call an assist to extend my range. And now I'm in. Now I'm in on my terms. All because she took the beat. Now, we're going to be talking about this in strategy. This is a scenario that's semi-realistic. I'm stripping down and simplifying a lot to make it easy to understand what a beat is. When we go over actual neutral patterns and I start teaching you kata, which are basically fixed forms that will teach you and give you fundamental principles about what we're teaching here. When I give you the kata, then we'll go about this in more detail. But for now, does everyone understand what a beat is now? Is there any confusion on what a beat is? I love juice. Good. All right, we're going to blitz these next 3. Because these next 3... Hey, Fraudulent, what's good? It's been a minute. We're gonna basically talk about these next 3. These next 3 describe the same thing. However, they are essentially different levels of magnification of that thing. To put it more simply, basically they are covering, in a broad term, timing. However, when I use these terms, they're going to be individual nuances that get tied to each specific thing or each specific word. The 3 words are going to be tempo, timing, and cadences. I'll explain each one. So, tempo, basically, when you hear tempo, I want you to think of, I guess, a fencing term that my good homie taught me is right of way. I'm going to borrow that term and definition for tempo. What does right of way mean? Right of way means who gets to attack at their leisure, or who gets to attack first, more accurately. So, for example, if we're standing right here, we're at 0-0 with frame advantage. If we press 2 normals of the same speed with comparable hitboxes, we're going to clash if we press it at the exact same time. However, if I backdash, I'm minus 15. Kefla is now plus 15. Kefla has right of way, or rather, Kefla has tempo. Why is this important? It means that if I'm not careful and I backdash and then 2M, Kefla can now attack me at her leisure however she wants. And the likelihood of me hitting her first is nil. As long as whatever she does has essentially the startup of whatever normal plus 15 frames added to it, as long as whatever she does is faster than that, if she presses it at the right time, she will always hit me. Every single time. It's basically a law of physics in this game. This ties in with beats as well, because that's one of the reasons why if you dash, you can ID back. This is why, when we do this, we maintain tempo. You're essentially making your opponent take time. You're not letting them gain tempo on you. What that means is, even though they're dashing forward and you're moving back, it's risky for them to properly attack you. They're not going to be able to reach you in time, or worse, if they do reach you in time, there's not much that they're going to be able to properly get from it. You're probably going to block, essentially. Which, don't get me wrong, is nice. You won neutral. But remember the order of operations, our PEMDAS. It's always better to hit your opponent. If you can't hit your opponent, make them block. If you can't make them block, make them move, so that way they take tempo. Order of operations. Hit, block, or get an advantage. Those are your 3 goals when you do anything in this game offensively. And inverse that when you are on defense. If you are on defense, you want to avoid everything. If you can't avoid it, block it. Or I'm sorry, if you can't avoid it, reflect it. If you can't reflect it, block it. Do not get hit. It's always better to dodge a normal. If you can't dodge a normal, it's always better to reflect it, because then you start the reflect mind game. If you block it, at least blocking is free. There's not a lot of chip damage and it's safe. As long as you have good defense, you're going to be okay. This is important, and this is why tempo is very, very important to understand. Now, if we zoom out a little bit from tempo, outside of that interaction, now we start talking about timing. What does timing mean? Timing is what you probably thought of when you were thinking when I said beats. It was probably what you were thinking of. So this, for example, has a very different timing than this. They're both 2 beats, but one was considerably slower and the other one was much, much faster. This is almost instant. This took a minute. This took a minute. They are both 2 beats. All 3 of them are 2 beats. There were only 2 actions, dash and a normal. Timing is what's very, very, very important. It is essentially when you decide to do something. It's very important to remember that timing has more to do with the individual than it does the character. Now, there are limitations, obviously. For example, this is as fast as I can reasonably input it, right? Somebody might be able to get it faster, or, you know, a bot might be able to shave like a frame or 2 off of it, but more or less, this is instantaneous. I cannot go faster than this. And the reason why I cannot go faster than this is because this is always going to take the same amount of time, because it's always going to have the same amount of startup and active frames. When you see attack startup, it's not actually talking about the startup of the move. It's talking about when that active hitbox first collides with the hurtbox. That's why if I do this, notice how it's not changing the attack startup until I hit Kefla. But no matter what, this is always going to be active at the exact same time. Every time. It's programmed into the normal. Would the second one be 1.5 beats? No. Don't overcomplicate it. Your timing can affect how tempo works in a real match, correct? I'm glad you asked that. Absolutely. You can lose tempo by simply waiting too long. So for example, if I go back to the previous example here, where, let's see, what does she do? Okay, I'm going to set this up. So if she does this, no matter what, I can always hit her here. I can even do that, right? I can even backdash if I respond. Hang on, let me see. Actually harder. How did I do it the first time? See? How did I do it the first time? It's really tricky. Yeah, I don't even know how I did it the first... I'm going to backdash twice. There we go. Cool. I can punish there, right? But watch what happens if I do this. I'm too close to the corner. If I delay it, though. I give myself... There's no timing. I don't have the time to hit her. She's too safe. There we go. That's going to give me more timing. But look what happens. Okay, I'm going to do it with an IAD. That's a punish. But if I delay the 2M, she's always going to block. That right there, the difference between hitting her, punishing her, and blocking her, is my timing. This is what I mean. If you guys have ever heard me give a criticism about somebody's play, this is what I mean when I use the term or the adjective sharp. Sharp does not mean attacking faster. It means attacking with the proper timing. If you're too late, if you're too laggy, if you're lethargic, you're going to miss out on your opportunities. And what's worse is that if you're a naturally passive player that doesn't really like to press their advantage, even if you get that clean dodge, you're more than likely not even going to press 2M at all, and you're just going to let her get away with it and return to neutral. I know, upon hearing that, some of you guys probably feel called out, because I know a lot of the people in my chat do this. This is why attacking with proper timing is essential. Timing refers to when you decide to make the decision. That is the element of Maai, which, remember when I said Maai has a bunch of considerations, timing is one of them. It's when you decide to make that choice. Your timings are important. And your timing can also tell me a lot about how you feel. When you get really in depth, you can tell, like once you start mastering strategy, you can tell when somebody's playing really, really aggressive because they're not respecting tempo and their timing is really, really, really fast. Or you can tell when somebody's afraid of you because their timing is super slow. They're not taking their opportunities. They're second guessing every single decision they make. They hesitate. Timing is critical. And then let's zoom out to the macro. Cadence. Cadence is basically all the way zoomed out where we're talking about the overall timings in the match. The overall speed of your overall decisions. Where timing refers to decisions on an individual level based on the situation. Cadence refers to the amount and the speed and accuracy of the decisions you're making over the course of a match. People have a natural rhythm. For example, if you guys have practice movement and you're of a skill level, you guys are have you guys ever had a situation where you see somebody like IDing back and then they're attacking you and they're just hitting like 2M, but you just keep avoiding them and you're like, yeah, woo! And you're kind of going to it, you're kind of going through it, and you feel like you're kind of playing Dragon Ball because you guys are like, okay, I attack now, and then I whiff, then you attack, and then you whiff, and we're just going back and forth. That happens because of cadence. You guys became locked in each other's cadences. And it's fun, but ineffective. Because if you're not hitting your opponent, that means you didn't press your advantage. It is imperative to recognize your opponent's cadence, so that way you can deliberately adjust your timings to attack that cadence. That's very complicated and that's very advanced for the purview of this particular section. But now you guys hopefully have an understanding of what I mean when I say cadence and what I mean when I say this is a big part of strategy. Do those terms all make sense to everybody? I'm surprised I got through that without a script. Are we okay? Are we all right? Are we following along? Okay. I want you guys to remember those terms and start evaluating your matches. And by the way, if you're not playing Dragon Ball, if you're watching Street Fighter, whatever, it doesn't matter. All of these, everything that I just mentioned is completely universal in whatever game you're playing. It's even universal in FromSoft games. Cadence is to timing as climate is to weather. That is a fantastic analogy. Yes, exactly. It is the amalgamation of their timings. That is a great analogy and a good demonstration that you do truly understand the point. Very, very, very happy about this. Now, with those terms out of the way, how do we establish a good mindset for strategy? This is going to be an ongoing thing. I'm always going to come back to this, but I also want you guys to remember what we talked about where I said that there were going to be 3 dimensions to all things in strategy. There's going to be a dimension for technical skill, meaning the actual mechanical execution of everything. Then there's going to be the strategic element of it. And then there is the moral or mental side of it. I went with ethical because I feel like that also covers, once you understand the, like, let me explain a little bit before we begin, but I do want to reiterate what these 3 things are. It's not just going to come down to your mechanical skills as a player, and the strategy side of it's going to come down to how you basically apply the terms that I just mentioned. The way you apply your beats, the way you understand them, Maai, tempo, timing, cadence, all of that thing, that is the strategic element of it. How can you apply these things in order to successfully overcome your opponent? And then the ethical side, I do think is very important, is that you need to think about what kind of player you want to be. We are all just playing a game and having fun. It's the equivalent of, I mean, when I say ethical in Dragon Ball, people start kind of like, I don't know about you guys, but it feels a little uncomfortable to me. And it feels uncomfortable because in my brain, right? This is just a video game. We're just pressing buttons, bro. It's not that deep. You probably have that same kind of reservation. But I want to discuss what I mean when I say ethics is important. You could say the exact same thing about Kendo. You can say the exact same thing about any martial art, hand-to-hand, weapons-based, kobudo, whatever you want. It doesn't matter. They're all going to be the same. It's just play, ideally. Even an MMA match or boxing, it's just a game. It's a contest. And you're just trying to see who can punch each other. It's a contest with fists. You can reduce it that way. That's in a perfect world. Competition, however, of any sort, whether it's in a video game or whether it's a combat sport or whether it's a life or death duel in 1600s, like in the Sengoku period of Japan or the Edo period in Japan, it's the same principle, but the stakes keep getting higher and higher, but it still pulls on the human spirit. Competition brings something out of us. The reason why we venerate culturally competition is because that is how you truly test your mettle. It's how you test your resolve. It's how you test your training and your belief. And it's a very powerful tool for self-cultivation. But if you are improperly using it, you can cause serious damage to your opponent, even if you win or even if you lose. Even if you end up losing, you can cause serious damage. If you've ever been in a martial arts class, you never want to spar with the dude who looks like they have a chip on their shoulder, who takes sparring so seriously, they don't pull their punches, they're going in, they're going hard, they want to break you, they get egotistical about it, they throw you on the mat and they go, what? And they start getting in your face. Suddenly, it's no longer fun. And this happens even in video games. There is a top player right now who I find one of the most unlikable human beings I have ever come across. I will not say who, but this shit happens. This shit happens, bro. When you have an ethical dimension, how you apply these things and the mentality with which you apply these things is incredibly important because we are practicing for the sake of self-cultivation. I'm teaching you guys in the hopes that you will join me on a journey of self-improvement in true Dragon Ball fashion. That's not just me. Even though I'm instructing you guys and I'm teaching you, and some of you even jokingly call me sensei, I don't see myself that way. I see myself on a journey of self-improvement, and I'm sharing my path in hopes that you guys will join me in also improving yourselves. I want to cultivate that. I want you guys to become stronger people, more resilient in the face of confrontation, more capable of handling conflict. That is why the ethical dimension is incredibly important. So as we go forward, it is very, very important that you observe this principle, that you guys think about this, and that you guys always carry it in the back of your mind. You don't want to be that person who's playing somebody and is hurting them. And this doesn't just have to apply to aggression. You guys can also apply that because, and I know we've all been here, press 1 in the chat and leave me a comment with your anecdote if this has happened to you in YouTube. If you've ever played somebody, maybe you were playing a homie or whatever, but they were having an off day and you could just tell that they were getting tilted by things that normally wouldn't tilt them, or you can just tell that they were really in their feelings. And it doesn't even have to be dramatic. Maybe they just weren't being an asshole, but you can tell in their play that they're just not feeling this. Like they are not where they need to be right now in order to do this. And press 1 if like you played and then after playing them, you noticed that they actually seemed really upset by it and then they had to walk away and then you kind of felt really guilty about that. Now, I'm not going to tell you about whether or not you should feel guilty, but what I mean by keeping a strategic an ethical, strategic vantage point is that if we only think of terms in practicality, you're going to always statistically crush that person. Not only that, but a lot of strategy also revolves around accounting for your opponent's mindset and attacking it. If I notice that my opponent is afraid of me, I want to continue giving them reasons to be afraid of me. If they're mashing because they're afraid, I don't want them to stop mashing because it's a free opening. So I'm going to keep doing what I think is bothering them. When I word strategy like that, that makes me sound kind of like an asshole, right? And it's because in conflict or in competition, I am. This is where you need to exercise moral judgment. If you are in a competition, you have to hold that. Because that person understands that despite their emotional and mental grievance, which we will discuss philosophically in depth, but that person tacitly agreed to understand that when you go to a tournament, you're going to win. Like you're not going to mess around. You're not necessarily going to make friends. I mean, yes, you will make friends and you'll hopefully, build some cool people and you'll have some cool friends and stuff like that. But when you're in bracket, there are no friends. You have to win. That's part of competition. You would feel like garbage if you felt terrible and then you notice that your friend who is trying to beat you in bracket is holding back on you and is trying to manage your feelings. That's not cool. But if you transpose that setting, do you really need to go full force and hit them with the most strategically optimal 2M TOD, prevent them from playing and just fucking destroy them when they came home from work and are having a bad day and they're just humoring you because you asked for games? Do you really need to go that crazy? Do I need to play Blue Coup Beerus against that person? No, I don't. I'm not like that's not really the point, right? That's not why we do this. So that being said, it's important to remember that when cultivating a mindset for strategy, because that is the last element of Maai. They call it kokoro no Maai, which is the interval of the heart. Cheesy, but incredibly important. This means that your timing is ultimately going to be decided not just by your physical capabilities and not just by the actual physical reach of your arms or your weapons or anything like that, or in this case, the actual startup and reach of a normal. It's also going to be determined by how you feel. This is why, when going forward, it is incredibly important that we develop the ability to maintain fearlessness, to cultivate a deep emotional center that makes us resilient to stress, so that way we can continue playing at our highest capabilities under an enormous amount of pressure. This is something that I would like. This is something that I would like to try my best to impart to you all. And this is also something that you're going to need to be able to read and understand in order to take advantage. Because if I notice that, wow, my opponent is really crazy, but I notice that after losing a match that they're starting to play too intensely, or they're starting to hang back a little bit more, that's going to help me get the upper hand on them. The second most important thing is that we're also going to take a holistic approach to the game. What does holistic mean? Holistic in this particular context means we are taking the game as its full sum. We are not breaking the game down into little sections. There is no division between defense, attacking, neutral, blah, blah, blah. There's no segmentation of this. It's all connected. If I see somebody having really, really, really good defense and reactions, that tells me that they lose neutral a lot, or that they play somebody that is extremely effective at neutral. You can't really practice your defense if you're winning neutral. You know what I mean? It's just not possible. Vice versa is also true. If your neutral is very, very good, you're going to be more used to attacking. which means your attacks are going to be a lot sharper. You're going to be a lot more likely to confirm your pressure. You're going to have a pretty good understanding of how to convert situations and how to be aggressive more effectively than somebody who's a bit more passive. Everything affects everything else, which sounds kind of like a dumb quote, but it's really, really, really true. Every decision you make is going to have an impact beyond that immediate situation. Calling an assist. If I get the touch here, would I be able to kill? No. But if I have both assists up and I do that and I spark, yeah, maybe. All of that depends on when that assist is going to come back and the timing with which they come back. If I'm pressuring and I spend both of my assists and they're not coming back, my ability to pressure is extremely limited. All because I called that assist to win neutral. So I called my assist to win neutral. Now my stagger pressure is something that I desperately need to rely on. I can't get cute or fake because if my opponent's paying attention to the fact that they use their assists or that their opponent used their assists to actually win neutral, they now have a better defensive leg up. Because if I don't have access, if I don't have access to these assists, like I have to kind of stagger, see? And then for me to actually get those assists back, like let me see. Not only do I have to take a long gap for it to come back, which I can do just fine, but notice how much longer I have to wait. Now, if I already have those assists up... Oops, my bad. 50-50. Immediate. That's a threat. You have to look out for that threat. And if you're looking out for that threat, I can get really mean. Oops. I can get really mean. For example, I can... See what I mean? I can start really, really, really messing with you. If you have a slower assist, you can even call the assist and then DR beforehand. Your ability to threaten your opponent is magnified. But your ability to impose those threats heavily depends on how you won neutral. Do you see what I mean when I say everything is holistic? Because not only that, I can't really do... I guess I can, but the timing is a lot tighter and a little bit less forgiving. However, if I, for example, let's say do Dalko Hansi, that's much nastier. The timing of that is different. All because the startup is slower. The timing of that is slower. Our assist choices have that impact on our team. The character order has an impact on the entire match, and vice versa. Everything is connected. So when we talk about the game going forward, and when we talk about strategy, team building, defense, neutral, blah, 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 it is all going to include everything else around it implicitly. Which means even if I'm just talking about team building and I'm talking about a point, don't think of it mathematically. Think of it holistically. Think about it and how, okay, we're talking about team building and what character to play on point. How does that affect the rest of the match? How does that affect my opponent? How my opponent's going to treat me? Blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of things that you need to keep track of, and your decisions have a direct influence on how they are going to affect the match. You must you must study thoroughly to understand this. You must research this thoroughly. If you know, you know. Now, the final big reason why we did this, the big thing that we were setting up to now is I'm going to teach you a skill that I would hope all of you develop very, 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 very quickly. We are going to be talking about the concept of appraisal. So I know you guys are kind of listening to this podcast style, lecture style. If you're watching at home or if you're watching on YouTube and you're kind of like rewinding this is the part where my YouTube audience is not really going to be able to participate. This is the reason why I tell you guys to join us for our streams. However, I hope you can still get something out of it anyway. As for my Twitch chat, who's currently with me, We're going to have a good time. This is where we're going to actually engage. So, who's ready to join me on this journey? Because we're going to talk about a very important skill, which is appraisal. Appraisal is exactly what it sounds like. We are going to develop the mindset and skills for appraisal, which is one of the most foundational cornerstones of strategy. How do we determine the quality of something? This is important because I feel that this also indicates a mindset that I think is very prevalent in the FGC due to the prominence of things like tier lists and the constant need to frequently compare things to each other. So the way a tier list is constructed mentally, you think about a meta. You think about what you believe, rather, is meta. You think about what you believe is strong and your understandings of these characters. You look at the roster of 44 characters and you start comparing them to each other based on how well they can execute what you believe is strong in the meta. If they are able to basically play themselves in the way the meta dictates or the way your understanding of the meta dictates, they're going to be top tier. If you evaluate them and their skills do not engage in the meta, they don't do something really, really big, or they don't do something meaningful, then suddenly they're going to drop down on the tier list lower and lower until you get a bottom 5, right? That seems pretty straightforward. And you might be wondering, well, what's wrong with this? This seems like a pretty practical way of approaching the game. It isn't, because by nature, tier lists are now inherently subjective. And if you give too much credence to a tier list, you become very prone to spreading misunderstandings about that particular character. For example, let's go ahead and touch on Adult Gohan. If we apply this tier list mentality to Adult Gohan, you're probably going to put, you know, how about this? I'll actually let you guys choose. Guys, if we have a tier list, Z tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, where is Adult Gohan going? What tier category do you think he's going to be in? You don't have to dictate his position. Just pick one of the four. Where is he going? If you're following along on YouTube, I want you to write it down. Write down what you think. A tier. Okay. We have a consensus. Okay. Anyone else? I want more people. Come on, join me. If you're listening to this, don't be afraid. Hop in. Water's fine. I am surprised Toad is quiet. Jam, Junie, Saber. Where is Adult Gohan going? Oh, geez. Yeah, hit me. So I have 2 A tiers. Where is Adult Gohan going? Z tier, A tier, B tier, or C tier? Where is Adult Gohan going on your tier list? Z tier. Okay. So A tier, Z tier. Anyone else? I encourage you guys to participate as much as possible. If you're listening to this, I know that there's an inclination to listen to me podcast style. I would encourage you guys engaging a little bit because, trust me, there's going to be a lot of information. And if you're not fully engaged with it, it's going to go over your head or you're going to lose track. I promise that's going to happen. It also creates a lot of dead air for YouTube, and I feel bad. He's mid. A tier. Okay, pick a tier. Yeah, tiers. Z tier, A tier, B tier, C tier. Def a top character if level 7 is achieved and is being piloted well. Okay, so Z tier, I'm assuming. What about level 0? If you're listening podcast style on your commute, take this moment to tap the person closest to you and explain to them why Adult Gohan goes in the tier you think he belongs in. Agreed. A tier as well as all AGH players are down players. Okay. So we have 3 A tiers, 2 Z tiers. Level 0 is the default A tier. But here's the thing that I'm noticing, right? You guys are starting to kind of partition which category he goes into based entirely on what level he's at. This is the inherent folly of tier lists. Z is above A tier, yeah. This is the inherent folly of tier lists. Because notice how, despite us trying to necessarily rank him, it doesn't actually tell us anything about the character. Worse, if you're making the tier list and you don't play Adult Gohan, do you actually understand the character? Or do you just understand how it feels to fight him? Maybe you're used to seeing some crazy Adult Gohan combos, or maybe you saw Wawa win a tournament with him and you're like, okay. And maybe, so this is not the place to Trode. Trode. Damn. I mean, with you it makes sense. But Toad, this is not the place to meme. So, with Adult Gohan and a tier list, this is not very effective and it's not telling us anything. Now, you might think so, okay, well, a good fix to this is when I build my tier list, I'll put level 0 in this category, when I put level 3 in this category, level 5 in this category, and level 7 in this category. No. That does not matter. And that still doesn't tell us anything. Because you have no idea how strong they are. Maybe the tier list can tell you how strong the levels are in relation to one another, but it's not going to practically help you very much if you have to fight this character. So you might be wondering, okay, well, how are we supposed to think about this then? Simple. Through appraisal. So appraisal is what tier lists kind of pretend to do, but not really. So I'm going to use an analogy for this particular one, where we're going to talk about swords. So you guys have a katana, or let's say you guys buy a katana or whatever, or you're studying Japanese martial arts, and you're looking for what weapon you want to study, or what discipline that you guys want to study, what weapon you guys want to study, blah, 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 blah. Maybe you get a little bit deep into the history. We're going to get a little, as Saber would call it, HEMA nerdy on this. But it's an important skill. If you look at the design of a katana and you look into the history of it, we are now going to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the particular weapon. So a katana, it's nice and curved. It's got a very long handle, so it's really good for proper leverage. It's a very effective cutter. The blade is actually rather thick. It's not too wide, and the slight curve and the way the Uchigatana is generally balanced assists heavily with edge alignment. This is a very effective cutter. Compare it to a longsword. A longsword has a distal taper, which means it gets very thin as it gets closer and closer to the point, and it's thicker at the base. The distal taper makes it more effective for thrusting. Cool. But because it's straight edged, not exactly the most effective cutter when compared to like the katana, but it's still good enough. Like you're still going to be able to cut through pretty much anything the katana can cut through. It's just not going to be as easy. Your edge alignment's going to matter a lot more with the longsword, right? Pretty simple. Then you have something like a rapier, where the blade is actually thin the whole way through. It still has a distal taper, but it is nowhere near as thick as the katana or the longsword. It's not as effective at slashing, but the actual length of the blade is also pretty comparable to most longswords. Sometimes it's even slightly longer, which means, and because unlike a longsword, which can be held single-handed, most longswords tend to be held in two hands, a saber is held in one, which means that because of that, you can actually take your center line off the actual engagement line, and it extends your reach because you can just reach your arm out a little bit further than most people holding two swords, or a sword with two hands can. All of these weapons have these unique strengths and unique weaknesses. If you try to cut with a saber, you can do it. You're not going to be as effective as the katana or the longsword because it's not what it's designed to do. Therein lies the most important detail that's missing when we evaluate things based on a tier list. We must examine every single character and every single tool and then every single person within their own context. Thank you for the resub, Devisor. I appreciate it. We must examine it within our own context. What does that mean? So let's go ahead and pick my team one more time, and then we're going to come back to the character select. So if I apply Bluku tier list brain, I could say, oh, Bluku's A tier, not as good as some of the top tiers. Is he though? Because depending on how we're talking about Bluku and what we're trying to do, there is not a single character more effective at it than he is. When it comes to moving forward, he is single-handedly the best, most aggressive point in the game. Better than Gogeta Blue, better than Vegito, doesn't matter. Why? Because every single part of his toolkit is designed to move forward and advance him towards the opponent. Which means when played properly in his own context, he has incredible strength and incredible ability to almost stick to the opponent. Where it really feels like he's smothering you, even when he's just doing this. Because you have to deal with these absolutely massive buttons. And then he gets in, and then he can make your life a nightmare. He has an unreactable grab. On top of having the universal mix-ups that everyone else has, his 6M in particular is actually quite long nowadays because it uses his JM hitbox rather than his JH hitbox. His jabs are not too great, but that doesn't matter. Everything he has pushback. Everything reaches. They even gave him the ability to control his pushback. Just so he can do this. This character, if we examine him in terms of what he's capable of doing, this character is absolutely bonkers, isn't he? You're probably thinking to yourself, oh my god, yeah, he's incredibly effective at moving forward. Probably the best character in the game at doing so. And I mean that without hyperbole. Okay, so what are his weaknesses? Well, defensively speaking, this is all he has. If he has 3 bars, he can level 3. And yeah, it's cool because he can side switch and put them back into the corner. But again, it's very expensive and you die if you're wrong. He could theoretically level 1, but if he level 1s, it tends to whiff over the opponent. Even in the corner. And you're minus 100, by the way. Your opponent can just decide whatever they want. They can just decide your fate right there. Defensively speaking, this character is weak. Yes, he can do this, but the angle is a counterattack. This is a counterattack angle. This is, okay, we're playing neutral, and then my opponent decided to do this we used earlier. That's what it's for. However, there are a lot of characters now that have basically projectile invul lariats. So if Bluku just decides to... I gotta time it better. Doesn't matter, it's gonna hit me every time. It's gonna hit me every time. It's hard to do it with recording. Yeah, there you go. Demonstrate. See the problem? He is not as effective as base Vegeta doing this. Or Adult Gohan doing this, which I don't even think is that strong, by the way, but that's another conversation. They are not as effective at that. Bluku cannot do this, and suddenly Bluku looks a little weak. There was a time period where everyone thought Blue Vegeta or base Vegeta was just better Blue Goku. And the reason why they thought that was because the JS was a lot more effective at sniping and ranges, right? This is the problem with tier list brain. If you put base Vegeta over Blue Ku on a tier list for that reason, what you're telling me is you value the ability to run away from your opponent more than the ability to move forward. But what if the opponent is better at moving forward than you are at running away? Suddenly, it doesn't matter how crazy your base Vegeta is. Blue Goku is going to win because you're playing his game. You're running from him. This is what he's designed to do. This is like comparing a shark to a killer whale. They're completely different animals with completely different functions for the ecosystem. Now, you can make an argument that killer whales are much more effective hunters because they're mammals and they hunt in packs and stuff like that. Yeah, that's probably true. But at the same time, a shark is an apex predator in its own right. The size of its jaws are massive. And if it manages to get a killer whale on its own, it might even take a giant chunk out of the killer whale if the killer whale doesn't have the strategy to win. If that killer whale makes a mistake, there's a risk. It's not free. In that regard, this is why it's useless to compare characters in the tier list way based on a meta. It's more effective instead to appraise accurately the strengths and weaknesses of each individual character, each individual team, and eventually, when you guys are really good, each and every player. You want to develop an instinct for determining the grade of a team, the grade of a character, or the grade of a person. Because not everyone's going to be the same. For example, you can give a mediocre wall hanger to a Kenjutsu master, and you can give a Muramachi, what's it called? A Masamune blade to a complete amateur. And the person with the wall hanger is most likely going to win. They are of different grades of people, and their swords are of different grades as well. This is why it's so useless to compare things unless the comparison yields a deeper understanding of both characters. So if we think about tier list brain and we just think base Vegeta is way better than Blue Goku, that's not very effective. He's better at some things. Blue Goku is better at other things. It depends on the value that you want to put. Now, there are some things that are universally true. Like, for example, Blue Vegeta having a mix mid-screen. Blue Goku doesn't have that with level 3. That's true. It's blue 50-50s don't come as easy to Blue Goku, though they still come pretty easy. It's just a matter of preference and a matter of what you want to accept. When you pick a team, instead of comparing them, being like, oh, Blue Goku sucks, or Blue Base Vegeta's better, or vice versa even, which I've been guilty of, that's useless. Instead, what you should do is you should appraise them as if they were weapons. Okay, this is a really, really, really good sword. The balance is a little off in my hands, and it's a bit too long for me. So I noticed that when I try to draw it out, I realize that I almost have to grip it again to pull it out because my hip just doesn't extend that far back. This weapon is nice. It's a bit shorter and a bit more my speed. Yeah, I'm kind of losing something in reach, but I will be able to maneuver this sword better in my hands. Do you see how much more effective it is to appraise things instead of, like, even though we're doing a comparison, the comparison starts with you rather than a baseline meta that you may not even fully understand, or worse, may not even really exist or be fully defined. A meta happens. We have this mentality that a meta emerges because we see top players and then we see that it wins, so we're going to try to do the cheapest thing to win. That is how a meta emerges, but just because a top player did something doesn't mean that it's without mistakes. Top players are just like you. They're just like anybody. Their understanding of the game sometimes isn't even better than yours. They're just mechanically so good that they're able to intuit a situation. There are many conversations I've had with some of the best players you have ever seen where I ask them a very basic situation and they go, I never thought of it that way. Not because I was wrong, but because they just intuited things and they never thought about it. But because they lacked intention, they were not able to properly do it at will. It was pure intuition. Some people are like that. It happens. I have seen naturals pick up a camera for the first time and take a beautiful picture. I have seen shitty pictures from accomplished photographers. It happens. It's weird. There is no meta. Now, there are things that eventually emerge where, okay, there are common strategies that a lot of people like, but just because it's popular doesn't necessarily mean it's strong. And that's important to understand. You need to do something that's based on you, who you are as a person. You need to understand and refine your grade as a person and find a weapon that works best for you. In this case, weapon meaning character. Weapon meaning team. If you are constantly doing these comparisons, you're going to lose the plot. And what's worse is that you may not even necessarily end up with a better understanding of either. You might end up misunderstanding both. It is much better to appraise the strengths and weaknesses of each individual character and relate them to what you're able to do. Now, here's the thing. For me, I don't mind Bluku not having great defense. And the reason I don't mind having Bluku having great defense is because I'm very confident in my neutral. I am aware of my grade as a player when it comes to movement and neutral. And I feel like everyone who's fought me here can probably attest to that. I hope. However, does that mean that I don't feel it when I have to block as Bluku? Oh, I feel it, which is why I have to improve my neutral so that way I don't feel it more. It starts putting weight, kind of like a build in an RPG. It starts putting weight on what I don't have. Every time I level up my stamina in a video game, I'm not leveling up my health. But my stamina might help me dodge more, so maybe I don't need the giant health pool if I don't intend on getting hit a whole lot. Or vice versa. Maybe I want to play a little bit more aggro, and my playstyle doesn't necessarily dodge that much, and I wear heavy armor. I'm going to need to be able to tank things, so I'm going to need that big health bar. Neither is necessarily invalid. There is no meta necessarily, unless like the only meta thing I could think of in a situation like that would be like, you want to have enough health to like survive the end game. If we're talking about like something like Elden Ring, for example. But once you pass that threshold, once you're like, okay, I'm comfortable with my health, the more you get, the more useless it is. Depending on how you play. It could be the most useful thing in the world, depending on how you play. Bluku is the best character in the game, depending on how you play. Now, a lot of people tend to be like, okay, what about Gogeta Blue, who's both defensively really strong and moves forward very, very effectively? That's true. Let's go ahead and praise Gogeta Blue, notwithstanding the meter gain nerf. We're not going to talk about the meter gain nerf. I'm going to pretend like this team is still in its prime. Any tips for self-appraisal? Watching my recording should be helpful, right? That is one way. But honestly, appraisal for yourself when you're just starting out should be through a series of things. The way I think you should appraise yourself is what comes natural to you, what do you feel is the easiest for you to do, what do you feel is the best at, then you relate that with an instructor or a teacher that you really respect, and then you want to relate that to the people that have to encounter you in that art form. So you want to also ask your peers. And once you see kind of like a bunch of commonalities lining up, that's when you begin to develop an understanding of, okay, I think this is where I'm really strong at. Like I can say my neutral is great, but that self-appraisal doesn't just come from me looking and be like, you know what? I decided that my neutral is good today. It came from feedback. It came from feedback from the people I was playing. It came from feedback from my students. It even came back from some of the best players in the world that I fought. It happens. But that helped me understand what I was good at. And it's also the thing where I feel like my strategy is the most effective. Now, what are Gogeta's strengths? He has a lot of them. He has an anti-air. He's got a DP. Already, he is significantly more stable on defense than Bluku. However, this is a commitment. This is a commitment. This 5L alone is as minus as some mediums. I am not even kidding. This is a 2-hitter. This is a 5H and it's 38. Her 5L is minus 33. This is... Hang on, let me go to the other team, actually. That's minus 29 and that's a 5M. That's minus 28. That's minus 40. Minus 29. This has less recovery than Gogeta's entire 5L, and this is a medium starter and has significantly more reach. That is a weakness. That is a Bluku. I'm sorry, I read Bluku in the chat. This right here is a problem because it means that every single hit you do is now suddenly a commitment. His 5M. And as if that's not bad enough, by the way, Adult Gohan, 27. And it's also a 2-hitter. This is 47, but it's also significantly more active and, you know, massive. See the problem here, guys? Now, does that mean that I think Blue Gogeta is strong? No. I'm sorry. Do I think that means that Blue Gogeta is weak? Meter gain aside, no. Obviously, because if this hits you, you're going to die. Because another one of his big strengths is damage. Damage, ease of use. He will get higher damage than Bluku on average. And on top of having higher damage than Bluku, he's easier than Bluku. Which means that you're a lot less likely to drop his combos in tournament pressure. It still happens, shockingly, but it's more common. Or it's less common. This is also free mix, so you don't need to worry about his pressure and guard cancel as long as you do. And you can cancel the first hit as well. So you can... Or you can... You can essentially get in and sort of bully your opponent. Which is powerful. And his stagger pressure is not great, but it's not good. I'm not going to pretend that it is. But he does have some things he can do. So the question is, does he fit what I would consider my personal playstyle? Does he fit me? Would I play this character? No, I wouldn't. He lacks too many of the tools and too many of the strengths that I need in my weapon. Now, that I need in my arsenal. Does that mean you shouldn't play him, though? I do think that the meter gain nerf is a very significant weakness, because at that point, we're no longer comparing like a spear and a sword. We're now comparing like, okay, a sword that's polished and a sword that has rust on it and has nicks in the edge. You should not play that sword. That sword is very likely to break on you. And that sword is very unlikely to cut the opponent. If that sword is strong enough to cut the opponent, it's also significantly more likely to get stuck, which is death in a sword duel. I would not recommend that rusty sword. There are some appraisals where you can think of where you're like, that's a significant issue that is intended to be a weakness. And while, yes, you can make up for it, you could also just simply play... you could also just simply play, you know, an easier, simpler character that doesn't have the meter gain nerf. Is everyone following me so far? So am I making sense? Does everyone have a pretty good idea of appraising and the distinction between how the FGC generally tends to see characters and stuff like that, and how I believe you should effectively start appraising characters for the sake of strategy. Did I make that case effective? Do you guys have any questions? Do you guys, anything that you want to know? Sounding good. Excellent. Okay. Now, this is the last part, guys. We're going to start talking about questions. I'm going to wrap up here. That's enough for tonight. We did a significantly longer stream than I anticipated. I will be doing, if you guys want, an after stream VC in my Discord. If you want access to the WTG Discord, all you have to do is subscribe. If you subscribe off stream, just go ahead and send a whisper to myself or Fuzzy Firechew with proof of your sub and whatever, and they or I will go ahead and send you the link. Once you get in, it's a lifetime membership. You guys no longer have to maintain your subscription in order to stay in the server. You guys can come and hang out with us. You can ask me questions. And here's the best part. You don't even have to necessarily upgrade your tier subscription to learn from me. But if you guys do subscribe or donate frequently or whatnot, I'm a lot more likely to prioritize you once we start getting a little bit busy. Otherwise, you will be at my discretion. In other words, it's a polite way of saying if I feel like it or if I'm able to. If I'm not able to, sorry about that, but it's free. If you guys do pay me, though, I'm a lot more likely to actually keep up and engage with you, but that doesn't mean that you can't benefit. So come out, hang out with us, help me build a community again. Let's go ahead and make Dragon Ball exciting again. You can do so by joining. And honestly, we would love to have you. If you guys want to support the stream in other ways, the donations are definitely the best way to monetarily support the stream. I'm not doing it enough to necessarily feel comfortable asking for donations. I'm still going to, just because these do take a lot of work. And I also am busy and have a social life. So I would like to be able to take my friends out for dinner or be able to pay a bill if if work is a bit slow. So if you guys, if you guys think I'm a homie and you think I'm worth it, please go ahead and consider dropping a few dollars. There's a donation goal right there if you guys want to help me meet it. I would be really appreciated if you did. But otherwise, don't worry about it. That said, is there any questions, anything? I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 5 minutes. The YouTube video can probably end right here, whoever's editing this. Thank you guys so much for joining me, YouTube. I'll see you hopefully next week for the next class, and I hope you're as excited as I am, and I hope that you learn a lot from this particular class. In the meantime, chat, do you have any questions? Anything you guys want to know about me? Anything that I can tell you? Anything that you would like to understand a little bit better? Now would be the time to ask me, if you're not going to be in that VC. Where should we start developing appraisal? Your characters. Your individual characters, and then your teams. That is the best place to start. It's also a fantastic question. Where should we start developing appraisals? Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else have any other questions? All right. I feel like I barely played, actually. Normally, I feel like these take so long because I end up doing like a combo that takes forever. I'm gonna go practice my Beerus. Okay. I'm gonna assume, and I'm gonna take that as a no, that we don't have any more questions. Like I said, guys, consider subscribing. Please support us monetarily if you can, but if not, I understand. How do I stop mashing? Developing proper strategy and understanding why you're mashing. Most of the time when people mash, it's because they think that they have active defense, but usually mashing, especially the mashing that you do, is usually a symptom of anxiety. It means that you're not necessarily confident of your in your ability to actually you're not exactly confident in your ability to properly block things, so you feel the need to mash. And the problem is that it becomes reinforcing. So, for example, this is where habits are built. The reason why habits, especially habits like mashing, essentially become ingrained is because when you mash, you're operating on the mindset of risk reward. So if you're constantly mashing and you get rewarded for it, your brain is going to remember that, and it's not going to remember the punishes that often unless the punishes are severe. So if you get punished, you're like, okay, I'm just going to mash less. But I noticed that in this particular gap with this particular timing, I have a higher success rate. So I'm going to mash on that timing every single time. The problem with that is this creates a habit where you literally can't stop because your brain's like, all right, we're safe doing this all the time, not realizing that this can be essentially a deceit. So the best way to stop mashing is to default to blocking. I know that sounds like obvious, but what that means is resist the urge to mash, and when you're blocking, pay attention to how you're feeling. Do you feel anxious? Do you feel antsy? Do you feel like you're overblocking and whatnot? Okay, once you are comfortable fully blocking, then we can start paying attention to the opponent. Okay, I notice that he tends to leave a gap here. He tends to do the same pattern over and over again. I'm going to reflect. And then from there, you can start making better decisions, because sometimes reflecting is much better to get out. Sometimes it's much better to attack in a better way. Like, for example, like what I like to do when I see somebody 6M, you can block the 6M, you can mash the 6M, that's pretty good. But what I like to do is I like to reflect, because it also catches the assist, and then reflect. And if I'm Kefla, 5S, or reflect, shoulder with Bluku, and then I call an assist, and now it's my turn. Now I can get in there a little bit more aggressively. Most people, when they get reflected, they tend to mash auto combo. The shoulder is a lot faster and tends to have higher priority than a light. So you're probably going to win in that situation. What's your Beerus Oki for future VOD reference? Which one? Okay. This is my last one that I'll do. The Beerus Oki that I do, that I'm not going to elaborate, but I'll show you, depends on the kind of knockdown that you get. There are several different types. I'm only going to demonstrate this once, so pay attention. The most common knockdown that you're going to get is going to be this one. I like to do that. This is a safe jump. Let's see if I can time it right. Oh, messed up. If you time it a little bit cleaner as well, you're probably going to counter hit the 2H as well. Keep doing that. I do not perform well under pressure. Yeah, like you have plenty of time. Like, if you feel like they're going to 2H or they're going to mash on you, you can... My bad, wrong one. You can tighten it a little bit. My god, this is annoying. Honestly, fuck you for this saber. There we go. You can counter hit 2H if you want, if you just time it a little bit better. So, this Oki is generally my go-to Oki, and the reason why I like it is because I can just whiff if they reflect and then do this, which is pretty cool. The advantage of it is that it also sets up a situation that's a post-orb situation that I'm not going to talk about right now. So, generally pretty good. I tend to do that a lot. It's really nice. That is one Oki that is very common. The other one is going to be JH, especially if you're playing a team that tends to preserve Smash. Then you do in the corner. The reason I do this, for obvious reasons, you can change the timing depending on whether you do 236L or 236M. I like to do 236M to delay things. You can also switch the order, and you can do 236L, 236M. So I'll do something like... You can do a bunch of neat stuff. What's really neat about this is it sets up a pretty interesting safe jump situation, where if you know your opponent's going to, like, block, you can easily do that. This, if you have the proper timing, for example, sets up, let me see. That. If you do it with proper timing, sets up that. The reason why we do that is because I'm sorry for everyone that has to see this. See? That's why. It's a mix. It's a mix, and you get to take your turn, and most people don't know how plus you are. So the amount of people that die trying to jump out of this or reflect is just too damn funny. Yeah. The last form of Oki is JDR, although it's going to be pretty much the same thing. Honestly, I do this exact same thing. You're going to get that Oki, but the height's going to be different. You're going to get that Oki a lot more off of like this. Like, no, I'm sorry, that was the wrong one. You're going to get that Oki more often on like this. Gohan makes it tricky. Yeah, it's trickier time with Gohan. I'm going to do maybe Goku? There we go. At that point, I just do like 1, 2, 3, 6M, and then same principle applies. Mid-screen, depending on how I knock down, I tend to do 2, 3, 6M knockdowns mid-screen. So that's because my most common corner carry route that I tend to do is this. Here, I just throw the orb. And then from there, it controls how they want to attack. It doesn't actually hit them. I don't care if the orb actually makes contact with them. And the reason why I don't care if the orb makes contact with them is because it is a very big Meiju look. Most people see the orb and they're like, what the hell is that? And they don't see anything else beyond that. But if they do tech into it, it also keeps them in place a while, which is pretty nice. So that's one way to do it. The last form of Oki is the level 3. Honestly, this is becoming less and less important because if you use this, they should be, dead. And it's basically going to be the same thing as every other character where you can just ID either float or low. Now, if you want to really be mean or your opponent has the habit of reflecting or whatever, you can do this. Now, it does tend to low profile. It does tend to low profile, but most people tend to block high. So this is why doing this is important. Because they'll tend to see it, they'll block high, and they'll be like, oh, let me reflect or whatever. And if they wake up reflect, not the best situation for them. Because they're not actually reflecting anything. I don't know why I hit down. Was it this one? Yeah, okay. No, you're gonna die. I forgot. You're too much damage. Here's what happens if they reflect. I'm plus 17. What do I care? I'm plus 17 and I'm still right in front of their face. There's nothing they can do. And now the problem is that DR is now going to hit meaty AF. I can still attack there. They're not actually dealing with the mix. They have to reflect again. But the big advantage of this particular mix is if they have Spark. Once again, trigger warning, content warning. You're about to see something utterly disgusting. See? It is a nasty Spark bait because it doesn't hit them immediately. When you immediately spark, it takes a minute. And you do have to avoid it, so I like to... And then from there, I'm kind of bad at timing it because I'm a little rusty with Beerus. But from there, you're probably wondering, how do you confirm that? Oh my god. So annoying. Fuck. This is actually quite difficult to time. Also, if YouTube... there we go. And then from there, you can just convert. And then from there, obviously, you want to do your best conversion. You won't be able to knock down, but they just took a Beerus level 3. They're probably dead. like, they're probably going to die off whatever you do. So, it doesn't matter. Oh, you're right. I'm an idiot. My bad, I forgot that requires 2.5 bar. Okay. Yeah, you need to have 3.5 bar to convert that. And from there, just do your thing. But there you go. That's essentially Beerus, or how I do Beerus. Now, there's a lot there, so if you think you're going to imitate it and then you're just going to do it, be my guest, but it's not going to help you very much, and you're not going to know the situations afterwards, because basically, instead of thinking Oki of getting them to block, I think of Beerus Oki like a skill path. So, like, basically, like, I think of Oki or Beerus's Oki like a conversation in an RPG, where every single option you pick creates a new dialogue tree that your opponent has to go through. It's not the same thing. It's not enough to just get them to block. A lot of it is situational, and I pick the dialogue tree based on the kind of situation I want to commit to my opponent. If you don't understand this, you should just do normal Oki. You should just do normal Oki. As much as this is going to help you, Saber, I mean, you can... No, I gotcha. This is the start of a conversation. Still really helpful, starting a place to improv off of. No, you don't want to improv. That's the... This is why I don't like people playing Beerus. Except Junie. Junie is my chosen successor. No, you can do that as well. I don't mind if you do that, actually. You can make it a short, if anything. I'll save that for later. Okay. Okay. I'm not going to get too deep into this. I'm going to move over to the VC at some point. I'm going to move over to the VC in like a minute. But I will say this, if you guys are watching. Don't just imitate this. And don't improv off of it. You can play with it, but that is strategically a really bad idea. And the reason why it's a bad idea to improv is because I didn't improv based on what I was doing. I labbed every situation out specifically to be able to see what kind of interactions that I can create. This is the product of a lot of work and a lot of study and a lot of research. If you want to use these things, I'm not saying that you have to use my particular Oki. You can use whatever Oki you want. But please, 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 please make sure that you understand the situation first. In other words, understand strategy first. Make sure you master these classes first before you go off on your own Beerus adventures, which is generally speaking why I don't recommend this character, and I don't think, and I'm sincere in this, I seriously don't think you should play him. However, if you want to and you're determined to not listen to me, then don't do any of this and just keep it simple. Because you don't understand him yet. Keep him simple. And then wait. Give yourself time. Study. Practice. And then as you begin to see situations pop up over and over again in practical matches, you're going to be able to start seeing how Beerus' toolkit interacts with those situations and how to basically make him stronger and fortify him. This is essentially what's good for the character. You also have to have the right mentality and blah, 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 blah. Point is that you can play this character. There's multiple ways to skin a cat, pun definitely intended. This is my method for Beerus. I am going to be completely honest. I do believe that my Beerus is probably the best, if you don't mind me saying so. I do think that the situations that I create and the ways I approach the character is probably the strongest way to approach him. But it is not the only way to approach him. But if you're looking to approach my way, then you need to basically seek what I sought. In other words, you need to understand where my head was at when I actually started labbing these things and why I play this character. Otherwise, you're better off just finding whatever Oki you can find on a character chord and being happy with that. Or if you are of a skill, you can go ahead and try to find your own stuff, which I also encourage. Make them your own. But if you're trying to learn the way I go about Beerus, because you've faced my stuff and you think it's like really, really, really strong, I appreciate that. But seriously, stop asking me about Beerus. Bye.